Dit is my so lekker om vanoggend met Matthew Purkis te gesels. Matthew, welcome to GROOTplaas.
Thank you very much, Mia. Thanks for having me on the show.
And we are talking Choose Organic. Choose Organic. I love this theme. Tell me a little bit more about this campaign that you guys are so passionate about.
Yeah, well, it's an international campaign. So September is really a month around awareness for organic agriculture internationally. So as SAOSO, South African Organic Sector Organization, we've adopted it in country as well. And really just trying to raise awareness around organic agriculture, the benefits that are facing the consumer, as well as the farmers, and overall health for the planet and our ecosystems.
If we say organic agriculture, what exactly do we mean by that? Isn't all agriculture organic?
Well, specifically in organic agriculture, we don't use genetically modified organisms. We also use biological control instead of synthetic herbicides and pesticides. There's many different differences in those types of inputs.
Yeah.
But what we encourage and what we see is really taken off globally is the transition towards more biological, softer inputs for agriculture.
Yeah. I think why the lift off is being taken or being seen is because the promotion for a healthier diet. So according to you, what key health benefits is associated with organic food?
Well, if you go down into the soil science around it, and if you're looking after your soils properly, then you're ultimately growing healthier crops, which are more nutrient dense because the soil has a better mineral profile, effective microorganisms that grow in there, as well as mycelia, which is really how nature does it. I mean, nature looks after its soil very well if you look at a forest, and almost mimicking that in your production style as a farmer results in more nutrient dense food. And there's some really interesting science coming out around the world. A chap called Dan Kittredge is really, kind of pioneering the nutrient density of food and looking into soil quality.
Yeah. I also want to ask, on the other side of the coin, what are some of the health risks with non-organic? I mean, what's that debate about?
It's quite a contentious one. But, I think the more research that comes out scientifically, we're starting to be able to back our claims as organic practitioners.
Yeah.
But South Africa is really exposed to a high amount of herbicides and pesticides, synthetic, and that really kind of dominates our retail value chains. And often we're not aware of what is actually sprayed upon the food. And there isn't really any local food safety testing in South Africa that ensures our population is actually getting access to clean, healthy, nutritious food.
I read somewhere that you guys say that South Africa's food system is one of the most unequal in the world. Why do you say that? What do you mean by that?
The disparity with people who have access to food, if you look at the big retail, ShopRite and Woolies and the likes, versus the informal market, where people really do battle to access a wide variety of different types of produce or food in their food basket. And often the cost of the average food basket for a South African person is not equating to what they get paid in a daily wage or a monthly wage. So there's this big disparity between, I suppose, the high LSM and the low LSM markets, as well as the access to overall food. If you look at the rural environments, it's really quite a tough place to access food in general. And a lot of the townships are deemed a food desert where there's only highly processed goods available at the spice shops, whatnot. So we've got a lot of work to do in South Africa to make sure that we've got a just and fair food system for the people.
And according to you, what role does policy or policies play in this whole framework?
Extremely important. I think in South Africa, some of our legislation is very outdated. For example, we've got a bill in this country which still governs the use of agricultural inputs, which was in 1947. So Act 36 of 1947 is one of those pieces of legislation which is, older than most listening to the show. So, yeah, it's high time that we really look at the policy environment. We also don't have any policy in this country that recognizes organic, regenerative, agroecology, any of these, globally recognized alternative production systems to conventional agriculture. Unfortunately, we don't have any policy that is allowing that to come through.
And I'm also sure that you have, you get to work and talk with people right across the world on this theme. How do we, as South Africa, how do we compare in this field?
Well, funnily enough, we were actually one of the pioneers of the organic movement. So we helped found IFOAM in 1972. So we were really at the forefront, like South Africans generally are, pioneering new sectors and new horizons. But unfortunately, that hasn't quite translated. But it is definitely a growing movement, and we see in 2024, there's a large majority of indigenous farmers, emerging farmers that are practicing organic almost by default. Not that you can really be organic by default, but more natural farming methods, indigenous farming methods that have been through their families and generations. If you look at our heritage as African farmers, we're practicing more indigenous agriculture. Yeah. So inherently in South Africa, we've got a really strong farmer base, which are either farming indigenously, naturally, organically, and now you can start to see regenerative agriculture really start to take hold in the large conventional commercial space too. So it's quite exciting.
Obviously, when you guys you're advocating for more organic farming, why so passionate about this? And I think at the end of the day, we all, food security is such an important theme, especially for a country like South Africa. What, according to you, are the benefits if it's not only just health benefits?
Well, if you look at our current trajectory on a global level, if we continue farming the way that we are, we're losing such a rapid amount of topsoil on a global level that within the next 60 years, we're going to be out of topsoil. And that's just really down to a number of things: the lack of organic matter in the soil, which is often linked to over-applications of herbicides and pesticides. Ecosystem collapse. We're seeing quite a significant collapse in our ecosystems, and a lot of that is driven by large-scale commercial agriculture, as well as deforestation, biodiversity loss. Overall health of our people is declining. And when you really look at synthetic agriculture, it's only been around for the last 100 years. And when you start to overlay the applications of things like glyphosate onto staple crops, you really start to see a sudden tick in global planetary health starting to decline quite significantly. So there's definitely correlations between herbicides, pesticides, genetically modified organisms, and overall human health, as well as the health of our soils. And if we ignore the fact that soil is really that, those 6 inches that give life to every single plant on the planet, if we don't look after that, we're not going to have much left for our children's children. So I think that's just the reality of the situation.
I also think that your approach, it's got to go a lot with education. So I'm quite interested, you guys as an organization, what type of projects are you involved in to educate people? Because at the end of the day, a discussion or a debate needs to be had. So what are you guys doing practically?
Yeah, practically we've got a number of training programs that we offer, specifically youth and women at this stage. We've also got a growing database of farmers nationally. Most of them are small and emerging. That's really the category of farmer that we're targeting. We've just finished a pilot program of 5 years, which was fortunately funded by the German government, which allowed us to participate and a Southern African level, where we were working with other lead organizations in the SADC space, where we were looking to develop these movements of agroecology farmers. And then the other thing that we're doing is, of course, the consumer education, which is kind of linked to this Choose Organic campaign to some degree. I think many consumers at the till are still not really voting with their wallets. And I think that's the most important thing that we want to try and get across this September, is that as a consumer, you have the power to change the food system depending on what you buy and where you buy it. So I think that consumer-facing education is probably the missing link, because they're the pull factor in the value chain. So we need to touch more consumers.
And speaking about consumers, you know, for people who would love to start introducing more organic food in their lives, you know, where do you begin? What are some of the key points to start off and basically say, okay, this is organic and this is how I'm going to do it?
Yeah, it's a big question. You know, I wish I could answer that with confidence, but at the moment, the supply is too little, because we don't necessarily have that allocated space and the research budget that actually subsidizes many things on the government side of things. So we're really doing this out of our passion. But the supply chains that are developing nationally at the moment, I mean, we've got a list of independent retailers that do support the organic value chain. So that's always a good place to start. You know, the large retailers aren't necessarily pro-organic because it's quite price sensitive, and these independent retailers are opening up space to connect the consumer directly to the farmer, which is a beautiful thing. There's also a number of e-commerce platforms that do link the consumer straight to the farmer. And then there's a really interesting concept that we're working with on the side, which is called food club hubs. Yeah. And the food club hubs is a really phenomenal way to almost organize a group of consumers in your area. And then the local farmers that do farm organically, make local products, they join the food club, and then you start to really get an incredible clustering of offerings from local farmers. So it's all these alternative ways to be able to get clean food into your household. It does require a little bit of dedication and research. You know, it's going to get there in the next, I would say, 5 years, where it's a lot more accessible to the average citizen. We're also looking at working closely with the spaza shop owners, particularly in the informal economy, to get the clean food into those distribution outlets, because ultimately that's what we're doing this for. It's not for the higher margin for the farmer at the end of the day. We want clean food accessed by the majority of the population in this country, because it's a basic human right.
Yeah, food security is we can't talk enough about it. It's so important. I really appreciate your time this morning, Matthew. Thank you for sharing with us. And you never know. I always say, you know, change begins with yourself.